all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fossone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. Dale at veteransradio.org or Jim at veteransradio.org to get more information, but we'd love to have you come out, and we'd certainly love to have you sponsor. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including RSS.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. Now, we've got an interesting program for you today, kind of in the spirit of Thanksgiving. We're going to hear from two veterans who had a lot to be thankful for because of, well, challenges, medical challenges that they had, and one of them's successfully through all those challenges and finished his career, and another is still fighting those challenges. So I think you'll find these interesting, and in the end, it'll give you something to be thankful for, too.
We want to welcome to Veterans Radio a Marine Sean Libby, who's got a story to tell. I don't know how to phrase the story. It's not interesting. It's an important story to tell that maybe our veteran radio listeners can help out on. And if not his particular situation, maybe the larger issue of organ transplants. Sean, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here. And I really appreciate you reaching out and scheduling this for me to talk about this.
Well, you know, your story is somewhat typical, right? Get out of high school, go into the Marines, end up in Afghanistan. You were a mechanic,
Yep.
Diesel mechanic. You did all the stuff that you have to do to support the front forward warfighters. And everybody who's been in Afghanistan knows, and certainly I hope most of the veteran radio listeners know about burn pits, which were very common over there. You know, there was
everywhere.
These were huge bases without any sort of landfill disposal, and you just burned stuff.
Right. Yeah. There's no waste management in Afghanistan, so you just burn everything.
And you burn it and that's plastics, cardboard, wood, computers with metals in them, biologicals.
Yep.
Everything. We won't get too graphic, but again, anybody who's been there or anybody who's read anything recently, kind of understands what went on during those 20 years. And even the stuff that you'd use to start the fires wasn't necessarily good for you, right? You'd pour gasoline on, you'd pour kerosene on.
JP8 for it. Yeah, just to burn it all. Yeah.
the ultimate barbecue fire pit starter.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, no, it was something we didn't know about. And what was crazy is that so I got out I got back from Afghanistan mid 2012, and then I had like 6 to 8 months left. And so when I got out, they noted I had toxic exposure when I got out. I didn't know it until I filed a claim May 2024, and it got immediately denied. But one of the things that said, like, certain things in your favor was that we conceded you had toxic exposure. That was the first time I ever knew about it. It was 2023.
And that word toxic, you went, whoa, what are they talking about here? And you had noticed when did you get out of service?
It was February 2013.
So you had noticed sometime after that, I think I read somewhere, quite a number of months later, you started to have some health issues.
When I got out, I didn't notice I had health issues when I got out, but they put me on some medications, atorvastatin and lisinopril for like cholesterol. I wasn't even sure why they put that on me, but they just gave it to me. I took it. And then that was in 2014. I had moved to Michigan in 2014 to the UP, which you know that. You're in Northville. Yeah. So I moved to the UP in 2014. I actually was going to like Great Lakes boat building school. So I did some traditional, got into a trade school, and I got with the VA there. They gave me those 2 medications I mentioned. And then they just would be like, watch your fluids, your potassium, your sodium, you're fine, you're good. And then 2015, I had gotten a sleep study done, and I was diagnosed with moderate to severe sleep apnea in 2015. And then after that, I really started focusing. I was going to the gym. I was eating healthy, eating protein. I was just, getting really healthy. And then 2017 came around, and then they were like, hey, let's do a biopsy on your kidney. And I was like, okay. So we did a biopsy. They're like, you have IgA nephropathy and FSGS. And I didn't know what that meant at all. And it was this this Indian nephrologist. And I say Indian because he just had a very thick accent, so it's somewhat hard to understand him. So he hands me this handwritten script for like prednisone and for some other meds, and he's like, "Go down to Walgreens, go grab it." And I go down to Walgreens and like, and they asked, "Are you gonna pay for this out of pocket? These are very expensive." And I said, "No, I can't afford this." So shortly after that, that was late 2017, and then 2018, I moved to Washington here, and I get with the VA here. And same thing, it's lisinopril, atorvastatin. They're like, hey, watch your sodiums, watch your potassiums, but you look great. You look healthy. You're fantastic.
How are you feeling at that point?
I felt fine, but when I think about it, something deep inside me felt off. Something felt off. I didn't feel quite right. And that's why I was like going to the gym. I was eating really healthy. I was like tracking, my proteins, carbs, and fats. And like, despite me fighting this feeling, like, it still felt off. Something felt off still. And then so yeah, that was 2018, 2019, and then so it wasn't until 2023 that I went into full kidney failure. Late 2022, I started having more symptoms, itchy legs. I was having unexplained tiredness, but I brushed it off. It wasn't a big deal. Other than that, I was like doing okay, working full time, busting my butt.
You're a young guy. You're healthy looking.
Exactly.
You're going like, I don't, maybe I just like party too much, or I got to sleep more or something. But
I'll sleep more. Maybe I'm not sleeping good. I got a CPAP machine, so whatever. It could be that. But I'm eating healthy. I'm going to the gym. I'm working full time, working my butt off. And then February 2023, January, February, I started retaining so much fluid. Right. It was getting so hard to breathe. I was getting exhausted just doing simple stuff. I finally went to the ER February 2023, and they're like, Sean, you have end-stage kidney disease. You're going to need dialysis. You're going to need a kidney. And those are the first time I've ever heard those words. I've never heard dialysis or organ transplant in my life until 2023 February. And then, And
this is what I want to get across to folks, is that it's a process of, you outlined a number of years it took, and really it was the fluid buildup that kind of manifested, hey, my kidneys aren't working right. I'm not I'll use the polite term, I'm not voiding this stuff out. I'm retaining all this fluid. But prior to that, nobody at the VA said, hey, you might be starting some kidney problems.
Nothing. Even when I got that biopsy done and this nephrologist that said you have IgA nephropathy and FSGS, nobody had ever mentioned dialysis or organ failure. No, those two words.
Or where that condition could lead to.
Absolutely. Nobody mentioned this. Nothing. Not a single. And that's how it's always been with the VA. It's like that last 10% of where it's like that last 10% of care just is not there. And that's where I've had the hardest time.
So after 2023 into 2024, you begin thinking about like, how did this happen to me?
Yeah.
And kind of in your research, or was there a doctor or a nurse who said, hey, that toxic exposure you had from the burn pits, that could have been a source?
No. I started dialysis February, I went into failure, and the VA still was like, hey, let's put you on some diuretics. Let's put you on torsemide and furosemide, and let's see if this goes away. And then so I went February, March, April, and it was just getting worse. It wasn't until a civilian doctor in May said, Sean, if you don't get emergency surgery, if you don't get emergency dialysis this weekend, you're not going to make it. So I had to do that. I had to go out of my way, go to the ER, opt for dialysis. And then, the first time I experienced it, I had a little, it was like a mini seizure, a vasovagal little moment. But finally, I was getting some fluid off of me. And then I started dialysis. It wasn't until I thought of it until a year later, May 2024, when I was like, damn, is this really my fault? Like, is this not something to do with the military? Because I'm at the time I'm 34. Why do I have why am I dealing with kidney failure at 34? And then there was luckily sweetheart, the local VSO, the veteran service officer. I reached out to her. She's like, file a claim. And I'm like, oh, duh. I got 30% when I got out. And then I got 60% through the sleep study. And then that was it. I didn't even know that people are filing all the time, for everything, flat foot or whatever. So I was, whatever they gave me, anything, I was happy for it. I wasn't trying to. So a year later, May 2024, I filed my first claim for chronic kidney disease. And then that's when I get denied. And that's when I find out I had toxic exposure. Nobody told me this. Not for the first full year I was on dialysis. And the first year was a whole thing too. I went through I started dialysis, the hemo dialysis in center. And then within a month, they were like, Sean, let's get you at the in-home peritoneal dialysis. So I go under the knife for that surgery. And then I learn about a new process for dialysis. I learn how to use the equipment at home. They throw about 60 boxes in your house, and then your home turns into a medical facility. And I'm like, I'm just now learning this whole dialysis and this life, and then I learn a new process. And that I started having problems. It moved within 4 weeks. It moved, so I had to get a revisional surgery again, and then it was still problematic.
So let me back you up.
Yeah.
Is VA providing medical care on the kidney failure?
No, I do an in-center it's like not through the VA. There's a local one next to me.
But it's not community care. They're not paying for it.
They are paying for it. They must be
paying.
Yes.
Through community care. Okay,
yes.
Good.
It's called DaVita is the name of the company.
It's a national. DaVita's a national dialysis company. I've seen them all around the country. And
right.
One of the things here is I want to highlight for folks is that while the PACT Act of 2022 made all kinds of diseases related to burn pits from Vietnam to Afghanistan, presumptive conditions, chronic kidney failure is not.
No, it's not. It's not one of them. So it took me a year to fight. I was fighting for a year with them.
So you had to go out and get a private medical, what they call a nexus letter. And for folks who aren't intimately involved in this area like you are, or I am as a disability lawyer, you get a medical doctor who says it's more likely than not this is from this exposure in service.
Yes.
So how did, again, VA doesn't recognize it as presumptive. how did your doctor convince them, hey, this is tied back to his service?
So I had my first nephrologist. He retired shortly, but he wrote me a letter, and he had even mentioned, about I had some numbers showing that I had elevated numbers when I was getting out, and so he had noted it as least likely as it is not. And his letter was actually pretty helpful. And then when he retired, there was a new nephrologist I was signed, and she also wrote me a letter too, advocating, saying, that hey, this is not, this has, ties back to the burn pit exposure. And yeah, I mean, really, those two letters were huge for me.
And one of the things that a lot of veterans with non-presumptive problems do is they kind of give up. They say, well, F the VA, you guys never helped me, I'm going somewhere else. But the disability line or silo at the VA is different than the healthcare silo. And you had to keep appealing the disability denials, and you got some lawyers to help you do that.
I did.
And ultimately, tell us what happened.
So shortly after getting denied, I got denied twice. And then the VSO, she had reached out to, referred me to the National Veteran Legal Services Program. Correct. And they were wonderful. I had a lawyer, Mr. Ryan Kelly. He had all of the information. He had all of the showing the burn pits and everything tied back to because I went to, in Afghanistan, I was in Camp Leatherneck, FOB Nole, and FOB Delaram. And all three of those places had burn pits, and he had all the information on those three places. And so he was really, really advocating and fighting for me. And it took a lot. I think 5 denials. And we were caught in this loop because the VA, when they get whatever, just the process they go, because, they won't make the decision on themselves, but they will always hire a medical examiner to do it. Always an outside medical examiner. So they would assign a medical examiner. That medical examiner, I swear they are trained to say no, because I filed complaints with each of the companies that those medical examiners were working for, because they'd call me on the phone and I'm like coming out of dialysis. And for example, the first one, she's like, so what symptoms are you having that tell you have kidney failure? And I'm coming out of dialysis. So I was like, are you kidding me right now? And so I knew my little attitude to her. I know I was going to get denied, but yeah, she was like, no, not related. And then get denied, but then you can submit, what is the word for it? A revision or
supplemental claim for more information.
Thank you. Yeah. So I submitted that, and then they go back to another medical examiner, and then I see that person in person. And then she, despite all, she denies me, and then we go back again, and then I get another person, and then we get denied again. So we're in this circle. And then I finally get approved by, because, once you get denied, you can request an informal hearing with a decision maker.
Right.
And that's a rule. I didn't know about that. I mean, Mr. Ryan Kelly, the lawyer for NVLSP, he knew. But I mean, how could any veteran on their own ever know that you can request an informal hearing with a decision maker? No. So we get in this and we're like, hey, we're getting caught in this loop here, every single time. So after a year, I finally got approved for it. And that has been, a godsend, being able to, at least, I was coming into financial, losing my home. I was going to lose my car. I was falling months behind on all my payments. And despite all, so luckily that worked out. And I'm very thankful for that.
You are now getting your disability payments, but you're getting your dialysis in the community. VA's picking that up. But you're on a transplant list, right? You need this is the part, again, most folks never have experienced this, so I want to educate our veteran radio listeners a little bit here, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Kidney disease, chronic kidney disease, doesn't reverse itself. There isn't a medication that fixes this, or a surgery, clip a little of this and take. So you're on a transplant list. You need a kidney from somebody.
Mm-hmm. I do, yes. And when you get with, I'm active on the VA Portland transplant list, and I'm inactive, but I'm accepted on the Swedish transplant out of Seattle, because when you are a veteran, you can have one VA transplant and one non-VA, so you get to be dual listed, which is great. I'm working with Swedish because I'm inactive until I get a few things settled with them that would satisfy theirs, because they are a little bit more in depth about their process than the VA is. But both of those are a deceased donor, and that's, I mean, to get off dialysis and have a more normal life is absolutely, that's my life goal now, is to have that. But a deceased donor has an average of 8 to 12 years versus a live donor, which can be 20 plus. So it's just the difference in life is just so much longer whenever you get a live donor versus a deceased one.
I want
Yeah.
to give a little background of research that I did getting ready for this, because we've never talked to anybody in this situation on Veterans Radio in 22 years of doing it.
I love that.
VA performs over 150 kidney transplants annually at its VA transplant centers. I didn't even know they had VA transplant centers. They have a number of them, I guess 5 of them or something. About 16% of veterans who need kidney transplants actually go through the VA transplant center, but 84% received a kidney at a non-VA transplant center. That's what you're talking about, where you're with in Seattle with
Swedish.
So these are the sorts of things that, like, people don't think about. Wow, I mean, this is, and I found on the internet there's like 100,000 people on kidney transplant lists. So when Sean says, "Man, I'm waiting. I'm on 2 lists, but I'm waiting," that's a lot of people. If people are like waking up to this because they're listening into you and saying, "Man, this guy got a raw deal," how do you help out? And maybe not even just help out Sean, that'd be great, but how do people help others who may need a kidney on a transplant list?
I think advocating for yourself, like, instead of, because in the military, it's always like, you go and you change your socks, you take some Motrin, you keep going. Like, that's right. What we did. But like, you really need to advocate for yourself. Like, not just what are we at? Just a few months ago, I had another Marine buddy that I, was with. We were in Afghanistan the whole time. He's like, I'm having issues. Like, I'm getting tired. My legs are itching. I'm having problems. Like, and I'm like, bro, you need to bring this up now. You need to take this seriously. So it's really, if something doesn't feel right, you have to say something. You really need to advocate for yourself, because I don't know what the system, like, it feels like, the system is just overloaded. And so it's so hard if you don't advocate for yourself, they're going to think you're fine. You really need to.
One of the things I'd add to that is, at least the VA doctors know what burn pits are and what toxic exposure is. But if you're out in the community and you've got a private doctor, they have no idea what you experienced in the military. They don't know what a burn pit is. They don't know the toxic exposure issues. So you're right. You have to advocate for yourself if something I think you said at the outset, something just didn't feel right in the core. Something didn't
feel right. That's why I was like, I was always striving to be healthy and eat right, because like something didn't feel right inside me. And it's like, even if, I mean, again, at least if they had just been transparent and be like, Sean, just so you know, like, we don't really even, if they had even been like, we don't even care, just so you know, you had toxic exposure and it could lead to this. Like, even if they had said something, and even if it ended up with me on dialysis, I at least could have maybe helped myself out, by 5 or 10 years or something, because I could have been less on protein or less on fluids, a little bit more strict than I was. But I didn't know anything was really wrong. Like, sort of like when I got out, there was like a floodgate that was starting to just slowly open up and led me to here now.
Is there a way for folks to find out if they have a kidney that works for you, or is this more of you're trying to get the word out that, hey, sign the donor form on the back of your driver's license, so that if you pass away and your kidney's still good, somebody else gets it?
I do have some. I have been working with this sweet lady, Miss Mickey Jackson. I think she reached out to you guys.
She did.
She wrote me an article asking for a live donor. And so there is a person on here trying to help me out to, because I'm O, because my blood type is O, and so which means I'm the most common one. Which means a type O usually is like the longest, like 7 to 8 years on dialysis before you get a kidney. And so it's harder as a type O because everybody can receive one, but only O can receive O. So I mean, there's a person that she had wrote with a phone number on here. She's a dialysis social worker local to here. I can give you her name and number if anybody wants to reach out and see if they are ever.
I think that's a good thing. Let's do that. It's Angie,
Okay.
right?
Yes, Angie. That's it.
So Angie is the dialysis social worker. Her number in Seattle is 360-734-4243.
Yes, sir.
I don't have a email for her, but again, I think you can probably check that out, people. If you're like, hey man, this motivates me. I want to make sure that I got good organs and they don't go to waste.
Absolutely. That would be, I mean, yeah, it's, I mean, through my faith in God, I believe that I'm fighting for a purpose and a reason, and I've been fighting my whole life, through just my adverse, just problems, overcoming obstacles. And so, yeah, if anybody can, that'd be the most amazing thing possible. And I would definitely be grateful every day of my life for something like that.
Well, it's hard to transition out of the military. I'm sure you had the same experience as everybody else does when you transition out, and you were in the process of learning a new trade, something to get, motivated on and have a passion on, which is what you have to have when you get out of the military. You got to find a new passion.
Absolutely.
And then to have this huge roadblock is really challenging, to say the least. So let me give Angie's phone number again. She's the dialysis social worker, 360-734-4243, and tell her, hey, I listened to Sean, and man, Sean Libby made me call you, and I want to figure out how I can help.
Absolutely, that'd be wonderful.
Sean, as we come to the close of this segment, what do you want to say to your other veterans, and what do you want to say to the public in general?
I think just really advocating for yourself. Like it's hard because it's not the people that work in the VA, but the system itself is just, everybody's stretched so thin. It can be hard, and just advocating for yourself. And if there's something that you think is wrong, like bring it up. Like, do not hold it in. And that was the thing I always did. I put my work in front of my health for those last few years that really could have helped me a little bit more. I put it all into work, and I put all of my health problems, all of my concerns to the side. And it's hard because I'm a single guy. Like, I don't have children, but I just, I have full-time job, whatever, commodities, but I don't have, a wife and kids. And if I did, it'd be even harder to step aside from work and go to your appointments and go do the blood work. But that's the biggest thing. Advocating for yourself is the biggest thing I can say.
Well, we appreciate you coming on Veterans Radio to talk about your situation and give some advice to your fellow veterans. And hopefully somebody out there gets motivated and reaches out either locally in their own area, or reach out to Angie, see where that might lead. God may lead it in a direction that neither of us can imagine at the moment. But stay strong, and we really appreciate you coming on Veterans Radio.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it for what you do too. I really, really couldn't be, I appreciate everything that you're doing and how you're advocating for us veterans out here. And you've been doing it for, how long have you been doing this?
22 years.
22 years. That is a lifetime, that's a lifetime. So thank you. I can't imagine how many thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of veterans have heard you and have, benefited from you. So thank you.
As I said, that's a story worth knowing about. Maybe it inspires you. Maybe you say, you know what, I should check off that organ donor notation on my driver's license, or let my family's wishes be known. Or maybe you want to get tested to see if you're a match for somebody on an organ donor registry on the kidney donor, and you certainly can call Angie out in Seattle, who's the transplant coordinator, social worker, and see if you can do something there. She's the dialysis social worker, 360-734-4243. And I know Sean would really appreciate it. So let's have a few words from sponsors, and then we'll get into the next story that's a little more uplifting in that it has already come through conclusion, but it wasn't without a lot of effort.
Military veterans touch everyone's life. I'm guessing right now you're thinking of a veteran, a close friend, relative. Maybe it's you. Even the toughest of us sometimes need help, but don't know where to turn for support. You don't need special training to help a veteran in your life. Even small actions can make a world of difference. If you know a veteran in crisis, please call the Veterans Crisis Line, 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. A message from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today, Derek Adametz, a Naval Aviator, spent a long time in the Navy, is out now. You have written a book, it's your story, kind of a personal memoir called Unbreakable Wings, Piloting the Impossible Journey Through Cancer and Naval Aviation. And we just gave it away a little bit by the title about some of the struggles. But before we get there, how did a nice kid from a small town in Wisconsin get turned into a naval aviator? What was the impetus?
It kind of started early, but I didn't recognize it until later. Being on the farm and growing up, and there's always crop dusters flying overhead, and being a kid sitting on a tractor, raking hay or doing yard work or throwing bales. There just was always something intriguing about it. And then, of course, 1986 comes along, and I'm a young kid, and Top Gun comes out, and there's a part in the book where I just wanted to see Short Circuit. Man, that Johnny Five is alive. That was the movie for me, and Dad forced me to this movie called Top Gun, and I went kicking and screaming. And when I came out, I'm like, that's what I want to do. It's like both parts clicked, that watching that plane fly overhead when I was young and seeing, the military aircraft flying off the aircraft carrier. I'm like, I finally, for the first time, figured, I think that's what I want to do.
I think a lot of people can relate to this story in that they've had sort of portions of your upbringing. And by that, I mean, great relationship with your dad, great relationship with your grandpa, farm life, hard work, high school sports. Give us that flavor, because that's really, Derek, where your foundation is built.
Yeah, it's, everybody has a story, and nobody really knows everyone else's story, and your story is the only one that you know. And growing up since I can remember, it was get down in the barn, you're helping milk the cows, right? And then as a young kid, you don't do much. And as you grow older, you kind of take on a lot more responsibility, and there's no vacations, there's no breaks, right? It's a long day of work in the field just to come home at 7 p.m. and then you got to run to the barn and feed the dogs and milk the cows. And I think that constant just work ethic is just kind of how, when you develop at that age, that's just was my mind. It was just built to get up in the morning and work all day. And if you can eat, that's great. But if you miss a couple meals, well, that's just too bad, because there's chores to do.
And it doesn't matter how skinny or small you are, you still got to throw that bale of hay, don't you?
Those bales were hay. Thank God they got lighter when I got bigger, but those first couple I picked up, they were, I think, probably as heavy as I was.
Well, and again, what's very relatable from a Midwestern standpoint is those high school years. And you had a couple of challenges in those years that maybe, again, were foundational for challenges you were going to have in the future and get over. So talk a little bit about the high school years and kind of how that built into your character.
Yeah, I think it, growing up on a farm, you're eating a lot of dairy, right? So I call it my dairy-fueled farm physique, right? So I'm entering high school, probably the largest kid in the class. I'm going to be the center of the football team, and a couple of my friends encouraged me to run cross country, right? And thank God they did in hindsight, but there I was, that freshman year of high school and cross country, everybody's clapping at me as I come across the finish line 10 minutes after everybody else, and they already have the chute already cleaned up, but again, I wasn't going to give up. So it goes back to kind of that farm work is, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And, I lost the weight and went through, and there was some challenges there. And, I don't know if that goes into college too, where, we talk about if you're getting into, college is great. I finally have it all figured out. I love running. I'm running 10 miles a day or every other day. And, college is coming to an end. And all of a sudden there's a huge medical emergency where my lung decides it's had enough air.
Yeah, exactly. But so you went to the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Like a good farm boy. But again, there's not a lot of cash around. So how did you get through college?
Well, obviously, growing up on a farm, it was I was on my own, right? And that was pretty clear from the beginning. If you want to go to college, go to college. And so, the whole thing about being a pilot's kind of coming into view. How am I going to get money for college? And so, getting on an old school typewriter, I guess it was a word processor back in the day. There were no computers. Tip, tip, tick, tick, tick as the fingers went across the keyboard. I typed up my application for both the Academy and ROTC. And that was how I was going to get in. And if I didn't get either one of those, I probably wasn't going to college. But achieved both. But my guidance counselor sat me down one day and said, I think you're a ROTC guy. You got way too much energy to go to the Academy and be kind of combined in and sit in those rooms all day and not get outside those walls. And so he really convinced me to take that ROTC scholarship, go to Madison, do the military thing. They pay for college. And then that's kind of what got me there.
I think today so many people sort of rule out or don't even think about ROTC, and you went to Naval ROTC again with that idea that I want to ultimately be an aviator. But I think a lot of people don't even consider it, maybe because they don't know anybody who's gone through it. Talk to us about that experience, and would you today recommend to kids, hey, look at the ROTC scholarship program?
Yeah, I think everybody looks at it from the military point of view, and social media gives you almost too much information, and not all of it is real, right? Top Gun wasn't real. There's nothing in Top Gun that was real life Navy, but it's a movie, and it's meant to be a movie. And even today, the commercials you see, it's not really what the military is. And I don't know if I would have made it through college without it, right? Because the first day, you're sitting there, you're at attention, you're making uniform, they're putting you in uniforms, and you're marching around, and it instills just that mental toughness. I think I already had it, but I never realized it until you get into ROTC, and then they have expectations. You just can't go out and do what you want. You have a GPA expectation or the scholarship goes away, and you're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to march on Tuesdays, and you're in uniform, and you're walking around the McLean Center where the Badgers play football practice, and you're learning things, right? And it instills that a character, I'll say, as well, right? It changes who you are as a person into a more responsible, mature kind of character. And I'm not sure I would have matured as quickly if I didn't have that.
It sort of accelerates growing up to be to be an adult. I think
that's right.
One way to look at it, because if you don't mature quickly, you'll be out, and you'll be out without that scholarship, and you'll be spending your days back on the farm. So there's a little incentive there. But we're back to, and I think in high school you had an eye problem. We skipped that. I want to mention that because then we're going to talk about the problem in college. Then we're going to talk about the problem in the Navy. So let's start with the eye problem.
There's so many problems, Jim. I appreciate you keeping me in line there because we were good there. So the first problem was just the weight, really. And, losing the weight was the problem. And then there was a day on a tennis court. And if you were back in the 80s, there was no safety equipment, right? So we were having a tennis thing for Jim, right, where we go and learn how to play tennis and keep score. And they had a little ball machine, and we'd hit it back. And one day I look up trying to fill the balls in the ball machine, and my buddy of mine hit a tennis ball back and hit me square in the eye. And no goggles, no protective equipment. We just didn't think about that stuff back then. And, I kind of let it go until I ran into a neighbor, and she saw my eye, and it was purple. Usually your purple isn't a color when you go for your eye color on any kind of application. And she could see there was blood pooling in my eye and grabbed me and took me home and ended up in the hospital. And, it was a hyphema. And so the dentist ball didn't pop the eye, but it made this big packet of blood back on the retina. And so I had to kind of sit in the hospital. And where this comes is now I'm scared, right? I'm just a young, I think, sophomore at the time in high school. And they have to patch both my eyes because, as you know, if you move one eye, the other eye is going to move. And so if I have one eye free, I'm still going to look around. And so it was the first time for 7 days I had sat there in complete darkness and stillness and blindness. And it, you kind of get in your head. I really wasn't prepared for how hard and difficult that was to get through that time.
Yeah. And again, veteran radio listeners, we're talking to this pilot who had this dream from being a young kid. Well, we all know you got to be able to see to fly, and you got to be 7 days of not being able to look out. You got to be thinking, is that dream over with? Obviously, you overcame that problem. Everything healed up. We get to college. Life is beautiful. Everything's wonderful. And then you run into another medical problem with this time with a lung. Tell us.
Yeah, I definitely thought the eye might be a distractor as we got there, but there was a lot of time lapse between sophomore and high school, but still it was on my mind for that first entrance physical, right? Are they going to find that little scar tissue in my eye? And, back in those days, we didn't have internet where you could look things up. So what you knew is what you knew. And so that was.
And actually, that also means that the medical exam couldn't find a digital record of that problem.
That's right. That is true.
Which today has often created bumps in the road because they find, when you were a kid, you had this problem or that problem. So, but let's get us to college because this becomes even more dramatic.
Yeah, the issues definitely amplify as they move along. But yeah, I never really happened to mention that eye. I just forgot about it too when I filled out that application. I don't know why, I just did. But yeah, in college, college was going great, and I was really in shape. Things were going well, and it really wasn't until my senior year, that last year, where I kind of crossed that threshold. Like, hey, I was a little bit excited. I'll even say a little bit arrogant, right? The whole world's in front of me, and I'm going to flight school, and I get accepted. And it was that beautiful Friday afternoon after classes in the fall, and the leaves were turning, and I had my baseball cap, my Badger cap on backwards with my Walkman pinned to my shorts, listening to my Whitesnake cassette, and I go out on a run, and I come back, and all of a sudden I'm about a mile from home, and it feels like someone stabbed me in the back. And I actually looked around to see if there was an assailant, right? Like it felt that real. And then come the weekend, like the lung hurt, I'm kind of moving around, and my lungs sloshing around like there's a little bit of water in my lung. It's it's hard to understand what's going on. My breathing rate elevates quite a bit. I get through Friday night, I get through Saturday, I go to the emergency room on Sunday, and I'm sitting there breathing like I'm running a marathon. Go up to the front desk, they have me fill out paperwork. I'm panting like a dog, sitting trying to fill this paperwork out, hand it back, and I sit in the ER for 45 more minutes, just almost unable to breathe. Can't take anymore. I go up and ask, and they say it's going to be some time. I said, well, I can't do this anymore. I go home. So I go home, lay down, go to bed. Again, panting away, but laying down kind of helped. Next morning I get up, it's Monday, so the University of Wisconsin Medical Clinic was open. So I'm like, let's go in there because I can't go to class like this. I can hardly breathe. It's labored breathing. My chest is heavy. I go in, they take an x-ray, and before I even know what's going on, I get thrown in a wheelchair into the back of an ambulance and just sent to the emergency room at University of Wisconsin Hospital. And so I have no idea what's going on, right? At this point, I don't even know if I have a thought because it's all so dramatic. They rush me in, throw me on the table. I mean, it wasn't really nice like you see in the movies. Like it was tossing me around. And they put me on my side, pull my shirt up. Nurse grabs my hand, starts talking to me. And I see out of my left eye, this doctor just kind of feeling with my ribs, takes a scalpel and poof, right between the rib cage. Still got the scar today, still a little sensitive. Sounds like a gigantic release of air. I pass out. The pain is immeasurable, right? Like I've never experienced anything at this time in my life. Wake up, tube in my chest, doctor comes in. I have a spontaneous pneumothorax. Spontaneous because it happened on its own. Pneumothorax, I have a collapsed lung. Left lung was completely collapsed. My heart was on the right side of my body. My esophagus looked like a question mark. I was breathing on a half, and all that pressure was on my heart. So it was a tension pneumothorax where my heart could have stopped any time because it just couldn't overcome the pressure of that air escape in my lungs. So that's what I had to look forward to right at my senior year, right before I was ready to leave for flight school.
Yeah, again, this is one of these medical complications nobody can anticipate. And there's a couple of choices that you just sort of fold the tent, call it a day, or figure out how you're going to get through it with some support. You got through it. Tell us about getting through it, because they kind of have to glue your lung back up together, it seems.
Yeah, this was really where I was ready to give up, probably the first time, because I thought, no way, a pilot needs eyes. I'm questionable at that. A pilot needs lungs. I don't think there's any way. And once the doctor went and did surgery, he came back and he told me he put a couple rows of staples in the hole in the top of my lung. And what they usually do is they scrape the scar tissue or scrape the lung so it's irritated, and when the lung inflates, it would adhere itself to the wall to kind of keep that lung inflated, so just to prevent any kind of additional tear in the lung. Well, because I waited 3 days and I kind of went out with friends and there's smoky bars back then, and inhaled all that air, I had an infection. He's like, well, I didn't have to scrape it because there was kind of an infection in there.
Oh, how lucky.
So that's great. I didn't think anything about it. I'm like, okay, but you took care of it, right? Until I think it was that night or the night after when my that infection kicked over, and all of a sudden my temperature spiked to 106. I'm starting to hallucinate. I'm starting to have trouble breathing again, and I don't think I'm going to make it through the night. I just had that feeling. Call my girlfriend at the time, said, hey, can you come with me? I just don't think I want to make it. I need somebody here. And, this is the point where she's making excuses and the relationship ends right there. Right. So it's not just the lung. It's not just flight school. I was dating this girl for 5 years, my high school sweetheart, and she leaves me sitting there in a hospital. So if there's a culmination where I'm just ready to give up, it was that point right there.
And as I say, you get through this, but it's not without a lot of time passing, and I don't know, I'm not sure I'd call it luck, but fate, because now you medically have to recover, physically have to recover, mentally have to recover, and oh, by the way, I got to go see the flight surgeon. So talk to us about kind of what's going on during that period in your head and I guess physically.
Yeah, and so, I thought for sure they'd just pull my papers, and I don't know if I'm even in the Navy's going to take me anymore. So there, before I even got to the flight surgeon, there were days and days where I couldn't walk, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't laugh, I could barely go to the bathroom because that lung, remember, all that rib cage just healing was, the rest of that semester was a blur. But like you said, I get to flight school, they let me go, but I'm like, they'd let me go because that's why I selected, but there's no way I'm going to get through that Naval Aviation medical physical, right? Like, this is over. So I didn't even unpack my clothes. I just kind of found a hotel and stayed and went in there. And if you've ever sweat before, I'll tell you, I was sweating in front of that doctor. It was a full day of tests. They looked at everything. I didn't lie about the lung because I still had the open scar pretty much. And he looked at me and he looked at my record, and there was a pregnant pause that lasted 2 years if it lasted 30 seconds, right? And I'm for sure he'd be like, sorry. Like, I was just waiting for that. And when he's like, oh, you're cleared, and he signed that medical clearance form and handed it to me, otherwise known as an upchit for those aviators, boy, I was shocked. I thought I'd be happy, but I think I was shocked and stunned in that moment that I'm sitting here with an upchit like, I'm going to fly. Because I never thought it was possible.
And what year is this now?
This right now is 1996. So I graduated in 96, so it'd been late 96, maybe early 97.
So off the flight school, and you do some activities at I think Pensacola, is it? And you get through flight school, and then you're off to, I think maybe it's Puerto Rico.
Yeah. So the quick is you go to flight school in Pensacola. Everybody goes there, aviation pre-flight indoctrination, and then you kind of do T-34s. I selected P-3s because it seemed like the great kind of personality and lifestyle I wanted, even though Top Gun was all jets. Go to Corpus Christi, Texas for advanced. You get winged down there, send you to Jacksonville, Florida, and that's how I learned to fly the P-3. That's a couple months. It's now about beginning of 1998, and I'm finishing up.
No more problems. The rest of your career is just straightforward, isn't it?
That's what I thought. Just like you said, hey, pass this behind me. I'm in the Navy. One, I never thought I'd get here after all of that. Nothing else is going to go wrong, right? Big question mark.
And so then
I select from my squadron. They're on deployment. They give me a call. And then I'm like, all right. So I go down there, meet them in Puerto Rico, do a couple flights in Puerto Rico. We go to Panama with my crew for a month. I am living the dream. Panama, if you've never been, Panama City, Panama, man, it was so much fun flying out of Rodman Air Force Base there. And then one day I wake up and we head back to Puerto Rico just for some little bit of training and some rest. And we're going to Panama again the next day. And I'm super excited. And I wake up with some chest pain.
Oh, boy.
So I'm like, all right, it was so bad I couldn't get out of bed. It was, again, back to the lung where it felt like someone stabbed me in the back. And I'm like, I'm breathing okay. I can't be the lung. So I'm like, let me go to the doc. I got an hour before pre-flight. So I go to the doc. They take some x-rays. He takes a long time. He comes back. I'm now late for pre-flight. Now I'm not worried about the health anymore. I need to get to the plane. I just really want to get back in the cockpit. I can't think about another medical problem. And he didn't even tell me what it was. He's like, sorry, you're down. And tomorrow you're leaving on a medevac to Bethesda, Maryland for some tests. That's all I heard. So I packed a small bag thinking, oh, I'm going to be back. He didn't say anything about a long-term stay. He just said some tests. And so I didn't take anything. I jumped in a plane. Flight surgeon came with me. We jumped to Bethesda, and there's no time wait, right? We go right to the hospital, and it is different place after different place. ENT, throat. They took some blood. They took some bone marrow, and all of a sudden I'm in front of the oncologist. I don't know what an oncologist is back in those days, right? And then he sits down in front of me, and he's like, so the test came back. They took a little bump out of my neck, part of a lymph node. And he's like, well, we got the results back and you have Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I look around the room a little bit like, are you talking to me? Like, I'm healthy. I'm running. Like, what do you mean Hodgkin's lymphoma? And what is that?
Yeah, this is, again, one of these, like, okay, when is enough, both from a personal standpoint, but now it seems that's a cancer diagnosis that's got to sound like, okay, that ends my career.
Yeah. Yep. And it wasn't even understanding the cancer because it's, again, I didn't really have internet. You can't just go research Hodgkin's lymphoma and gives you all the symptoms. You're like, oh, here's a bunch of pamphlets he gave me, and I only knew what I could read in front of me. And he's like, and by the way, in 10 days, you start chemo. And there's a 50% chance you could be sterile from chemo. So now I'm thinking, wow, so now I'm not flying. I'm starting this chemotherapy. So now I'm starting to, the gravity's starting to kick in and like, well, this is big, right? Like this, I actually didn't start thinking about flying. I'm just now thinking about, am I going to make it through this?
And one of the things too, I think most of our veteran radio listeners, having been in the military or have friends and family in the military, understand that the military medicine is pretty damn good. That the doctors and the nurses and the specialists really kind of have trained, and some of these folks are the best of the best. And you received great medical care getting you through this, but at that point you're just sort of thinking, what the heck has my life turned into?
Yeah, in a lot of the book I really kind of anchored at this point because there was a lot. It's not just go to chemo and go home, and every cancer is different, every treatment's different, and so you all fall under the same umbrella, but everybody has different experience, even with the same chemo. So in the book, I anchor a little bit about kind of going treatment to treatment and kind of I call it the staircase into the basement. You kind of level off, and then they step down to chemo, level off and step down, and you never quite make it back up, and it's just a continual kind of body degradation from losing the hair to losing the weight to just no energy. And it was great care, but my body was taking a physical toll, and there were times where I didn't think I was going to make it out. But they told me 6 months, 6 cycles. So every cycle is 2 treatments. So 12 treatments, 6 months, and I'm done. And they take a CAT scan to make sure the tumors are reducing. And an emergency within emergency then happens at month 6, right? I get to month 6, I'm actually got some energy thinking, hey, this is it. I'm going to go in. The doctor's going to say I'm done and I can leave. And he says, well, there's a further reduction in the tumor, so we're going to have to either do radiation. Well, first he just says, we're going to do radiation. And then I fought with the doctor a little bit. I said, I'm not doing radiation. This is working. And so then he's like, well, then you're doing 2 more cycles of chemo, 4 more treatments. And at that point, any kind of hope I had just went out the window. I'm like, I can't do 4 more treatments. I am not going to make it through this. And so that was kind of an emergency within an emergency.
Yeah. And I let's talk a little bit about who the audience for this book is, because while we're talking about it here on Veterans Radio, and certainly a lot of veterans, even post-service, have a lot of medical challenges that I think this book would help them realize, hey, stick with it, you'll get through it. But when you were writing this, who did you feel that your audience was?
So I think that was the hardest part of writing the book was one, I had to dig up a lot of memories and thoughts that I buried, right? And so I had to go through those emotions. And so, I got the chills a lot when I started thinking about the chemo, and there's a lot more in there packed in as you read the book, and we'll let the readers kind of maybe experience the book. But, I had to, if I'm going to write this honestly and raw, I have to put myself back in there. And so at first I thought I was just going to write it to people who are undergoing cancer, going through an issue. But the more I wrote, it doesn't matter what the challenge is. The problem is like it's resilience redefined, right? Like it's about embracing discomfort. This whole life of mine has been almost discomfort. And I just have to embrace where I'm at, redefine what resilience is, and just find my way with grit. And it's just a story of true grit for anybody who needs a story that really has a lot of grit in it.
It really is a fantastic, easy read, inspirational, clearly has military applications, but that larger issue that he's pointed out about just having grit. So thanks for listening to Veterans Radio today. It's one of those longer interviews you'd find on our podcast if you went there. And we're really appreciative, Dale and I, that we're going into our 22nd year, I believe it is, on Veterans Radio. We have a lot to be thankful for, both family, community, and the support that we give and get from doing Veterans Radio. So we hope that at this time of year, you've got things to be thankful for. Maybe it's because your health is better than Sean Libby's, who's on weekly dialysis and waiting for a kidney. Maybe it's because you've overcome with grit and resilience some of those things that Derek just talked about. But in any event, we're grateful for you listening. Go check out veteransradio.org and our podcasts. And until next week when Dale's back, this is Jim Fossone, and you are dismissed.